Alright, we're going to use the surface tools to create a solid flow form based on our sketch pictures that we've brought in. So here are our two sketch pictures we did in our last video, and I'm going to start a new sketch on a plane that's in the same area as the sketch picture I brought in, but it's going to be separate than the sketch image. I'm starting a whole new sketch for this spline. The spline I'm going to lay down right on top of the form, so I'm going to use that drawn image underneath to help me place this spline accordingly. I'm going to move it around and adjust it so if you've been working out these forms or the proportions in Sketch, you don't have to redo all of that work. In SolidWorks, you can base your lines on exactly what you've already drawn. So I'm just pulling around the points and pushing the arrows to get this spline tool to line up the best that it can. And when I'm totally happy with that curve, then I'm going to save this sketch and get ready to extrude it. So we'll get out of this and we'll go to the surfaces menu, and we're going to use the extrude surface. So based on that single line, we're going to extrude a single surface in the object. The surface is infinitely thin, but it's sitting right on the profile that I've drawn and is pushed out. Now I'm going to start a new sketch and draw the top part, or the other line on this profile as a spline, and extrude it as a surface. I'm going to get normal to the sketch so it's easier to draw, get up to my spline tool, and start laying down the points of the spline. I'm going to fast forward just a little bit through pulling this curve into shape. There's a coincident marker there that kind of was hooking it to the edge of my box, so I took that off. I'm still just kind of pushing it around until the shape of that curve is just what I want. So when that's done, I've saved the sketch. I'm going to go back up to the surfaces menu and extrude the surface. I'm going to pull it in the other direction, and when it's about the right length, I'm going to save that as well. So now I have these two surfaces that mimic that sketch I brought in, and I'm going to hide that first sketch just so the screen clears up a little bit, and I'm going to get ready to use the surface trim tool, and I'm going to trim off the edges that I don't need. So at first I select the two surfaces that are going to cut. I make sure remove selections is on, and now I'm selecting all the trim parts that I want to remove from the object. And I went ahead and did it now so that it's a little bit easier to see my form as I'm building the other sides of it. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to start a new sketch, and I'm going to use the other profiles that I imported as a sketch picture. I'm going to get normal to it. I'm going to go ahead and start with my spline tool, and I'm going to lay down the spline for this sketch. Now I'll just sort of try and quickly work through pulling this spline into shape. And again, you can see I accidentally grabbed a little coincident marker there on the end of my surface, so I'm going to take that off so I can more easily move the spline around. I'll save it and extrude it again with the surface, asking me to pick that sketch that I want to extrude. I'm going to change the direction, and I feel good about that, so I'll keep it. And then I'm going to trim off the edges. So go back to my trim surface. I'm going to select the two surfaces that I want to use to cut each other. Make sure I select what I want to remove, and I want to remove those two edges, and that's going to build one side of my object. Now I'm ready to lay down my final spline. So I'm going to start a new sketch. My very last one, based on that same plane where my sketch picture is. I'm going to get normal to it so I can see it. I'll lay down my last spline, trying to avoid those coincident markers that were keeping me from pulling the object into shape. And so you can see I'm really overbuilding these splines so it fully crosses and intersects with the shape below. We'll do just a little bit more work on this one, and then we'll extrude it. Okay, I'll keep that. Now I'm going to go back to my surface tools, use the extrude surface, pull it in the other direction. Like the way that looks. I'm going to save it. Now I'm going to trim off this last face. Trim off the extras from around the face. Go to my trim surface. Select all the surfaces that need to be added, and select my remove selection. So I'll pick that edge, and once the material is removed, I have my solid flow form. The last thing I'm going to do is just hide that last sketch picture. From here, you're good to go.